It's time for today's face-off on Fox Soul. Challengers Quan LX and Big Angry Adams, ready to go blow by blow on those hot topics. Face-off on Fox Soul starts right now.
Sean Combs, the artist, the fashion designer, the actor, the businessman, and he has launched careers. He's won Grammys. He's been seen as one of the biggest players in making hip-hop mainstream. But how is all of this going to affect the hip-hop industry and the culture going forward? Joining us now is Variety's senior music writer, Stephen J. Horowitz. Once again, Stephen, great to see you. Like we were just talking about it, and we did. We've seen changes. We saw Harvey Weinstein's downfall, exposing sexual exploitation in women in the film industry. Like, do you think that we're about to see this possibly in hip-hop as well?
I think we are seeing it in some ways already. We've seen powerful men in hip-hop be held accountable for the alleged ways they've treated women over the years. Whether or not those claims are substantiated, there have been recent lawsuits filed for sexual misconduct against Def Jam executives Russell Simmons and Kevin Liles.
In this round, here's Quan LX.
Charles, we are a week into the P. Diddy trial, his federal trial for sex trafficking and a host of other charges. We've heard from a couple of witnesses as of now. The star witness, Sister Cassie, was on the stand majority of all last week, and she gave detailed testimony, horrific testimony, and many people cringed, including myself, at some of the things that I heard. But based on what I heard and the reporting from those who are actual witnesses in the courtroom, who come out of the courtroom at the end of the trial and give testimony to what they witness, I believe that P. Diddy is absolutely guilty of severe, horrific domestic violence. But nobody that's attending the trial right now believe that the U.S. Attorney's Office has proved sex trafficking, coercion, and a list of other laundry list charges that they all threw on the wall, hoping to see what sticks. But let's talk about Cassie a little bit further. Now the defense is rolling out text messages that Cassie initiated that shows she was a co-conspirator in the freak-offs, showed she was enjoying it, having fun with it, and even giving suggestive ideas of other things they could do and the sexual horrid activities that she liked and enjoyed. That Diddy did not initiate these texts, she initiated. Also, the defense is leaking out that there's going to be certain videos and pictures that prove that Cassie was not a victim of the freak-offs, but was also a co-conspirator at best or at worst. Charles, I've said this before about the Diddy trial. How could Diddy have all of these freak-offs and be the only one sitting at the defendant's table? How could all of these folks who take the stand against him now, some of those are going to be workers and co-workers, people employed, people who worked in his inner circle, who helped secure sex partners, secure prostitutes and escorts. They did all of this, but he's the only one on trial. All of these other celebrities and stars were involved in these horrific quote-unquote freak-offs. He's the only one in trial. If Cassie admits to being sexually assaulted, why are none of the escorts that she clearly can identify are not being charged with sexually assaulting her? This stinks to me. He's guilty of horrific domestic violence, no doubt about it. But sex trafficking, coercion, and conspiracy, I don't see the RICO charge.
So he's been charged with racketeering, he's been charged with trafficking. It's nice that you are conceding now that he is a brutal misogynist and abuser, because the portrait we painted from sexual perversion, I think that the limits of that was the testimony that he would have Cassie rub other men's semen on his nipples. I mean, just weird stuff.
Why she lick it off?
Hold on. Weird isn't a crime, right? But if you look at not just her testimony, but we saw the testimony or heard the testimony of former Danity Kane member Don Richard, and then her ex-friend Carrie Morgan. It's very important to note that Carrie Morgan testified that her and Cassie's relationship ended not just because of the abuse Diddy inflicted upon Cassie, But apparently she testified, not apparently, she testified that Diddy also assaulted her in 2018 in an effort to force her to identify who Cassie was seeing other than him. And that ultimately was the catalyst to end the relationship. Look, this is the beginning of a long trial. I think it's a cop-out, and this is the second time you've done it, where you've said, why aren't other people at the table? I think last week you said Cassie should have been at the table.
I still believe that, absolutely. Have you heard those text messages that she has to answer to now? Have you seen her text messages? Have you seen her suggestions, her ideas? Do you know that she was directly involved in having fun and promoting the freak-offs in those text messages, many of them that have yet to be revealed yet because the defense have not had the opportunity to put on their side yet? The U.S. Attorney's Office told the judge we need 6 weeks. But what all do you think is going to come out when the defense get a chance to put on their side when they're already knocking serious holes into the racketeering and conspiracy charges and the coercion charges right now, just based off the U.S. witnesses itself? Even commentators who are legal minds are saying we don't see the conspiracy charges or sex trafficking charges. We see domestic violence, but not sex trafficking, not conspiracy, not RICO. He should not be the only one at that table, Charles.
Firstly, yes, he should. He's the head of the serpent. If there are cooperating witnesses that were somehow complicit in the criminality and they're testifying, and the state has the choice.
You say complicit, don't water it down.
Okay,
who were directly involved in the rapes themselves, directly involved with securing the prostitutes and the escorts, directly involved with taking money and paying these escorts, and being in the room when these assaults took place. How in the hell are they not involved?
So you agree that Diddy was soliciting prostitutes and escorts, male and female, to participate in his...
I agree that Diddy was a big-time super freak.
Okay.
And he paid for these activities. But I also believe that Cassie was a super freak also, and that she was more than willing to participate and enjoyed participating, maybe not in all of it, but some of it, absolutely. Look at the text messages that she initiated on her own, where she talks about enjoying it and gave ideas of other sexual crazy shit that they could do. Look, man, this man should not be on trial by himself.
Okay, I think it's absurd to suggest that Cassie was anything but a victim, and you're wrong.
It's our own words.
Okay, and you're wrong about they had the opportunity last week to cross-examine her and present their evidence that undermined her, and they tried. And it's interesting what they're doing. The defense counsel is doing, trying to make lemonade out of lemons. They are saying, okay, yes, he did a bunch of drugs. Okay, yes, he's a domestic abuser, and you're echoing them. But yes, we know all this happened, but none of this other stuff happened. But you're sitting here, you're saying, yeah, he trafficked people for the purpose of prostitution.
I didn't say trafficked.
Okay, well, he involved them.
No, wait a minute. He did exactly what they've always done in the rock and roll industry, the country music industry, what they do in Hollywood daily, the same thing they did at the Playboy Mansion. They even talked about him overdosing at one of the freak-offs at the Playboy Mansion, but ain't nobody suing the Playboy Mansion. Charles, look, man.
What would they be suing the Playboy Mansion
wait a minute.
for him using opiates?
I can tell you why. The same reason that Cassie sued the hotel where the assault took place, and she's supposed to receive $10 million settlement at the hotel where he assaulted her. So if you got assaulted at the Playboy Mansion and you can sue the hotel, you can damn sure sue the estate of the Playboy Mansion the same way.
I think the allegations in the civil suit against the Intercontinental stem from them hiding the evidence of the brutal abuse.
Yeah, but if you was forcing the sex trafficking at the Playboy Mansion and assaulted the Playboy Mansion at one of the freak-offs, how the hell are they not responsible at all?
But that's not the testimony. The testimony is he went to a party at the Playboy Mansion and that he used some very strong opiates and had to be revived. We don't, did the Playboy Mansion pass out the drugs, or did he bring the drugs with
their
him?
Side. Well, you're a former defense attorney. You know you save your greatest nuggets until you make your presentation and put on your case. You know that.
That's actually not typically true, right? There's a lot of times where you present your entire case during the cross-examination of the state's witnesses. But here's the thing. I firmly believe that this all is downstream from the release of the horrific video from the Intercontinental Hotel.
CNN's releasing it, of course.
I think that this piqued the interest of U.S. attorneys, And that's the thing. They get to decide where they're expending police energies, right? There is an actual bureaucrat that says, hey, let's go look into this. And then they build their case around it, right? But the thing is that Sean Combs gave them an incredible wealth of things to build around it.
He's a freak, Charles, but he was not
I'm glad we can agree.
But he was not running a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, if he is trafficking humans and
a RICO
drugs
charge
to
has
have
to support that you were running
parties,
a criminal
it's
enterprise.
a crime.
Within Charles, if having a sexual freak party is running a criminal enterprise, inviting prostitutes, male or female, and paying them is a RICO charge, well, everybody in Hollywood would be locked up.
But here's the
Every
thing.
rock and roll group, country group, and rappers would be locked up too. But see, the problem is, you rappers, pay attention here, they coming after you all. They coming after R&B black singers, soul singers, and rappers. That's who they really want. You think that this Smokey Robinson thing is by coincidence? Sit back and watch. There's going to be more black artists that they're coming after, and let these historical white super freaks who do the same thing get off and pretend like they never did anything wrong.
So we have seen a major sitcom star go to prison for decades.
And who was that?
Decades old, the 70s show star. We saw him get decades in Los Angeles for a decades-old alleged sexual assault. We obviously saw Harvey Weinstein.
Where are the big names, like black names?
Okay, he was
Where are the big names? We talking about Bill Cosby. We talking about P. Diddy. We talking about you to Michael Jackson. Charles, where are the huge white names? We don't have those huge white names. And now we're being told, as you and I were talking earlier, that the FBI director is lying.
I don't think he's lying.
Talking about Epstein committed suicide.
Okay.
Sit here. You sitting right here for the whole world.
This is
Are you telling me you believe Epstein committed suicide?
Yes. But this is you trying
Charles,
to shift the subject away
let's
from
stay on
Sean
P. Diddy.
Combs.
Go right here. Let's stay on P. Diddy.
The reason Sean Combs is looking at this indictment, and I do think the horrifying Cassie video on the domestic violence is the catalyst, right? And we heard you're trying to, I don't know, whitewash over the testimony of him beating her in the kitchen. And
he's guilty of domestic violence, yes.
Horrible domestic violence. But he's also guilty of trafficking humans and drugs across state lines to have these crazy parties, because he is clearly...
He will not be found guilty of a RICO charge. Watch.
Well, do you think he'll be...
I guarantee you he's not going to be found guilty of a RICO charge. I guarantee you he's not going to be found guilty for the conspiracy charge. If they find him guilty of something, it's going to be for being an awful human being to Cassie. That's what they'll find him guilty of. But those other laundry list of charges, I don't see it.
And I think you are echoing the argument of the defense attorneys whose job it is to take this horrible human being and focus on...
But also other great legal minds say the same thing.
Did you meet the elements of the crime? But the state, one, they haven't arrested. Two, I think they're going to check all the boxes before they do arrest. But more importantly, he is indefensible. You keep here talking about, you're like, oh, well, the prostitutes and Cassie helped secure him and other people, they should be charged too.
She picked
but
a few
by
of them.
saying that...
She picked a few of them.
By saying that, you are conceding that he did, in fact, engage in the behaviors that are the basis of the prosecution.
So let me ask you a question.
So
let me ask you a question.
Okay to say, oh, Whitey did that too, or Whitey did it worse. That's not a defense to prosecution.
So you don't think that Cassie enjoyed any of the freak-offs?
I think Cassie, as in her testimony, as I agree, I think we've got something, the burning bed syndrome. When you have a woman that has suffered domestic violence, that is trying to maintain a relationship with a man that she sees as wealthy and powerful and having
so his money did come into play in her mind.
Okay.
According to you.
No, obviously
her money came into play.
But she was absolutely trying to please this man, and then she got herself in a situation where she was terrified.
And this is the burning bed syndrome?
This is a man that had beat her so horribly and beaten her down so horribly.
He's guilty of that. The burning bed syndrome.
Wait, how about the Kid Cudi allegations?
Okay, but wait a minute.
That he threatened to have his car
Puffy
blown up.
was in that same bed if it was on fire.
Okay.
If it was burning, Puffy was in that bed. She was in that bed.
No one was beating
All kind of
Puffy.
men were in that bed.
No one was beating Puffy.
Excuse me.
Sean Combs is a monster.
Let me say this.
And Sean Combs needs to spend the rest of his dang life in prison.
I disagree with that. Not the rest of his life.
But
no conspiracy charge.
Let's disagree. Look at
no RICO charge.
How do you disagree?
He won't be convicted of that.
If you agree that he's been trafficking people, how is he innocent?
I agree he paid for sex, but that wasn't trafficking.
Okay, if he's paying for sex to move people across straight lines.
Bob Kraft of the Patriots paid for sex.
Okay, but he didn't bring driving them across
he didn't get a RICO
lines.
charge.
But he got charged.
He was involved with sex trafficking, and they dropped it to the lowest misdemeanor and let him go.
All right, Quano.
President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. The former president is currently at his home resting in Wilmington, Delaware, a source told NBC News, but it is unclear where the former president will receive his treatment. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor has been covering this story for us throughout the course of this evening. Yamiche, what have you learned?
Well, as this sad news has made its way around the world, we're hearing a slight tone change from some Republicans and hard-right conservatives. Donald Trump Jr., who is, of course, the president's son, as well as Ronnie Jackson, who was a former White House doctor and now serving in the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House, from Texas. They're both spreading conspiracy theories, unfounded claims about President Biden's cancer diagnosis. That said, the vast majority of people are really taking a somber tone, including President Trump. I want to read to you some of the statements we've heard from other Republicans. Secretary of State.
In this round, here's Charles Big Angry Adams.
Okay, Quanell, that was a reference to a pretty horrible tweet made by Don Jr., which I think we'll show up on the screen in a moment. But it is him pushing the narrative that the doctors knew that Joe Biden, our former president, had this very aggressive form of prostate cancer, and that it was covered up. It was part of this grand lie to get him reelected, and they're just now coming out with it. I think it's an effort to spike the ball. I think it's despicable and disgusting, and I think it's probably not actually accurate in that the PSA count for this, it's like stage 5 Gleason score. I didn't know what a Gleason score was till today, but a Gleason score of 9. It's metastasized to his bones. I think it's very tacky for social media. I mean, we weaponize everything. I think it's horrible to exploit this tragedy. But on the flip side, Quanell, we do know that, we were lied to about the laptop. New York Times was pushed off. We were lied to about Hunter taking money from Ukraine and China for the big guy, for his dad, and we were lied to about his cognitive decline.
Let us extend our condolences to the former president and his family, and I pray that he will make a recovery. But Charles, let me say this, as awful and mean-spirited as that tweet by Donald Jr. was, I'll be honest with you, it's true. Talk to any man in America that has had prostate cancer or prostate cancer surgery or has received chemotherapy after being diagnosed. You just don't get that stage of prostate cancer overnight. That comes from prostate cancer diagnosis for years. In fact, the symptoms of prostate cancer are severe. You get problem with urination, you get pain in your rectal area, you get pain in your testicles, and you often urinate blood before you ever get to a stage 4 or 5 diagnosis. And for it to have spread to his bones, that means he was having severe symptoms a long time ago and had to been treated for it. I believe it was absolutely a cover-up to hide the true condition of his medical condition, along with his cognitive skills. That we've now heard an audio from Jake Tapper, his interview with the president, to where we can tell cognitively this man ain't nowhere in the hell could have been in charge of the White House. They took advantage of him, his inner circle, and those who knew should be ashamed to show themselves in public because they lied to the American people when they knew that this man medically was not qualified to be the president anymore.
And that is why he stepped out of the election in this historically unique circumstance, and Kamala stepped in. But I don't think there are a number of doctors that disagree with you. You can have asymptomatic prostate cancer. It's an incredibly curable.
To that stage?
Hold on.
With no symptoms?
Well, yes, that's saying.
With no symptoms?
First of all, it's an incredibly curable form of cancer. They wouldn't have sit on. Apparently, when you're north of 75, the PSA levels and the testing is different. And this is something that probably was just caught. And it's really horrible.
And you pushing that same falsified lie.
I'm not pushing a lie, and it's horrible.
He had symptoms. I guarantee you that man had severe symptoms. Charles,
it is horrible that we were lied
knowledge.
to about his cognitive ability. It was horrible.
And they
it
would
was
not lie about his
clearly
physical
an
medical
effort
condition,
to secure his re-election so he could sit down and so he could get reelected and then give the presidency to Vice President Harris. There was clearly a conspiracy about the laptop. There was clearly a conspiracy about Hunter Biden and his brother taking all kind of money and getting these pardons. It's all despicable.
Charles,
but we had an
talk to
election.
any man.
Trump won.
Talk to any
so
man
why are
who
we
was
sitting
diagnosed
here trying
with
to
prostate
kick
cancer
this man and his family
at that level,
when he's clearly
at
dying?
that level?
There's
I
no
sympathize.
stage 5. It's over.
I pray for his
Bone
family.
cancer at 82.
Yes.
He's dying.
And you really believe that they just diagnosed that, and he had no idea?
Yes.
He had no symptoms.
They would have treated him.
Charles, I believe he was being treated.
Okay.
And I believe they kept it secret that he was being treated, Charles. I believe he absolutely was being treated.
Okay.
I believe they kept it secret he was being treated because on several occasions he disappeared from the White House and didn't tell nobody where he was for a couple of days. Charles, he was being treated. I don't believe that this just happened. No, sir. But don't believe it at all.
If
don't
he in
believe
fact
it at
was
all.
being treated, this is an incredibly curable form of cancer that he could have got aggressive treatment for and just went back to being a politician. There's no reason. There's no upside. They hid the cognitive.
Why lie about
because they lied about the cognitive decline because he would have had to step down and they thought he was the best horse to ride to the victory. They lied about his family
who was
being
running the White
corrupt
House?
for obvious
so
reasons.
Who was running? When you listen to Jake Tapper's interview, to those audio recordings, are you sitting here telling me that you think he was in charge of the White House?
No, I don't think he was in charge of the White House during the entirety of his presidency. I think he was propped up because they saw him as someone could win. But I don't think we need to be spiking the ball and teeing off on him when he's clearly dying.
I pray he recovers, but those who hid it from the American people and lied about it, they should be held accountable. Okay, because they blatantly, on purpose, lied to the American people about a man that was not cognitively able to be the president, physically already seriously ill and sick, but do anything they can to get a reelection.
None of this has to do with his cancer. And hey,
I believe
now
he
he's
was
a
already
former
being treated.
president, and let's let them be sad, and let's not say ugly stuff on Twitter. Shame on you, Don Jr.
That's it for the Face Off on Fox Soul. We'll catch you next time.